Pistons won their eighth game in a row. JB Bickerstaff is now firmly in the Coach of the Year discussion. Malik Beasley is firmly in the Sixth Man of the Year discussion. And should Troy Weaver get any credit for the incredible run that the Pistons are on? All that and more on this week's edition of the Palace Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to the Palace Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano, and joining me this week is Jasper Apollonia, Aaron Johnson, the regular stable of cast and crew. Fellas, how are we doing riding an 8-game winning streak?
It's fitting that we're all here to talk about the Detroit Pistons while they're playing the best basketball that they've played since the creation of the Palace of Pistons brand, since the creation of the Palace of Pistons podcast. It's fitting that we're all three here to talk about it. I wouldn't want it any other way. There's so much to talk about. We don't often text each other before the show and be like, dude, I'm really excited to get on and talk right now. But I know that's the vibe right now is we're all really, really excited to be here. We've got so much to talk about, and I'm just ready to get into it with the fellas.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you back, Mike. And luckily, we've had the Pistons to keep us happy while you've been gone. This team is on an absolute tear right now. This is the best Pistons team since George W. Bush was in office. Just let that sink in real quick. George W. Bush was still in office. Goldman Sachs hadn't been bailed out yet. Okay, the last
How much
time
was a gallon of milk, Jasper?
the Pistons have not been this good in 18 years. I have not had this much fun watching a Detroit Pistons team since I was in middle school. I just can't wait to get into it with you guys. We have so much to talk about, and we have so much to be happy about. Yeah, let's go, man. Let's do it. Last night was a movie.
We have a lot to talk about. Last night was a movie. Thank you for softening up the Celtics before they face the Cavs today, for those of you who are listening, tomorrow for us in the chat here. Yes, we have a lot to get to. But before we do get to all that, I do want to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, and that's BetOnline. And BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan, first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA, college basketball, and it's almost March, fellas. By the way, to the NHL and to UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Stunning that March is in 2 days, or 1 day if you are listening to this the day that it releases. Certainly be doing some betting when it comes to March Madness, so we'll be using BetOnline. We thank BetOnline for being a loyal sponsor for well over a year at this point, and a promoter of this show. Guys, let's get right into it because we have a lot to talk about. From the Pistons winning their 8th straight game, they demolished the Boston Celtics in a game that felt like it was about to get close, and the Pistons just sort of pulled away, did what they needed to do to maintain the Celtics at arm's length. We have Troy Weaver on the agenda too, but let's stay on the high of talking about the Pistons winning their 8th straight. They beat the Boston Celtics 117-97. There's a lot to unpack from the last 8 games. We could start with any number of our listed subtopics under that. Aaron, do you want to start with any one of them in particular? Because I could go into Malik Beasley. I can go into JB, being a Cleveland guy. I can go into, their playoff positioning. But where do you want to start?
I'll start here because I was in the building last night for the Pistons' blowout victory over the reigning NBA champion Boston Celtics. A win that put the Pistons on an 8-game win streak. It's the largest win streak in the NBA. And quite frankly, I think when we look back at this season, I think this is going to be the victory that we look at as putting the Pistons on the national map. There was more media in the building than at any other time I have witnessed this year. I sat in a press room that was more crowded than any point in time that I've been covering the Detroit Pistons. I sat in a press conference that went pregame with JB Bickerstaff that went longer than ever before. So many questions, all centered around the growth of a team and the growth of a young group of core players that are all budding at the same time. And it really feels like the tides have turned in Detroit. Last night was certainly the biggest game that the Pistons have played in a very, very long time. And it was felt by the players. It was felt by the media. It was felt by the fan base. And how Detroit came out from the start of the game, the energy that they had, the energy that the crowd had, it was a raucous environment. It was full of energy. And for the Pistons to come out, they ended up giving up the lead in the second quarter. Boston won the second quarter and scoring 35 points in it. But Detroit comes out in the second half. We think maybe Boston's woken up. This is where the boys are separated from the men, and Boston's going to end up wrapping this one up here in the second half and getting the victory that I think everyone expected they were going to get. But Detroit came out in the second half, had a great start to the third quarter, had a great end of the third quarter, and had a phenomenal start to the fourth quarter. They looked like every bit of a playoff team. They looked like every bit of a team that is not just getting in the playoffs to make an appearance, but a team that's getting in the playoffs to go on a little bit of a run. They have veterans that are setting the tone on a nightly basis. They have role players that are figuring out and being maximized to their absolute peak. And they have a superstar, a franchise cornerstone, a top 10 player in the NBA in Cade Cunningham at the helm. Yesterday was just an incredible victory for the Pistons, and it shows that so much has changed in such little time. This team is here, and they are coming at a very, very quick pace from where they were just one season ago.
Mike, I thought you hit it kind of on the head when you said we could start from a million different places because there is a million things to love about this team right now. They beat the Boston Celtics by 20 last night. And frankly, guys, it wasn't as close as the score says. The Celtics pulled their starters with 4.5 minutes left in the game. They got destroyed by the Pistons. And I know the halftime score was a tie game, but that was incredibly deceiving. The Celtics got really, really hot from three in the first half. They went 14-26. Once they cooled off just a little bit from that, it was over. And you're exactly right, Aaron. They imposed their will upon the Celtics last night, upon the reigning, defending NBA champions. They went out there from the opening tip and they beat their asses. They beat the crap out of them. 62 points in the paint for the Pistons, 20 for the Celtics. They destroyed them. Asar Thompson, we have to talk about Asar Thompson. You want to talk about a guy who had a coming out game? Holy crap. Jason Tatum was in hell last night. He was locked the F up. And I know he dropped 27 points. It did not matter. Asar took the ball from him at will. Nothing Tatum tried to do against him worked other than for a short span in the second quarter when Asar was not playing on him. And let's add in the fact that Asar maybe got the number one crossover of the year on Jason Tatum. He literally made him cross his eyes. That's how bad he got him. And it wasn't like Jason Tatum slipped on a wet spot or he tripped over someone's foot. No, he got crossed and he almost fell on his ass. Malik Beasley coming out there saying, I'm the real sixth man of the year. I don't care about Peyton Pritchard. And Peyton Pritchard played a great game. Didn't matter. Malik Beasley outplayed him. JB Bickerstaff outcoached Joe Benzula last night. JB Bickerstaff, and this is something we've been talking about for maybe a month now on this podcast, is officially getting Coach of the Year talk. And you're getting guys who are talking about him saying, no, this is the front runner. And guess what? We all agree. it is impossible not to be thrilled about this team. I don't know if it's ever going to be this fun again, guys, because next year there's expectations.
Correct.
This year there were none. And
Yes.
we are just playing with house money. Whatever happens from here on out, it's great. It's all gravy, baby, because you have officially established yourself as a team to be worried about. You are a team to be scared of. You are a team that if you come into their house, and let's be real, if they come into your house, because this team wins on the road and they win in the West, they win against good teams. If they come into your house, you're in trouble. You're in for a rock fight because Asar Thompson's coming after you, because Ron Holland's coming after you. Those guys had 8 steals combined last night. 8 steals. They beat you up. They out-physical you. They out-hustle you. They out-rebound you. They are fantastic. They're probably the best rebounding team in the NBA. They're great on both sides of it. They have, like you said, a bona fide superstar. They have the 6th man of the year, who is the best shooter in the league, by the way. Every number backs it up. Malik Beasley's the best shooter in the NBA this year. They have all the complementary pieces. They have Tobias Harris, who is the metronome, the guy that gets them right. And they have an entirety of the team that is bought in. Jalen Duren, his game has gone through the roof since the last 2 months. This team is legit, guys. This team is completely legit. They are a top 10 NBA team right now. They are going to give somebody hell in the playoffs. And I just, how soon can we get there? How soon can we get there so I can go to MSG and watch my Detroit Pistons beat the piss out of the New York.
That might happen in the first round. I mean, that's a distinct possibility of it happening.
I'm hoping. I want them. Give me the smoke. I want it. I want all the smoke. I'm tired. All those things we've talked about over these years, get them out of here. I no longer have that mentality. This is a Detroit Pistons team. This is a Detroit Pistons team. They play Detroit Pistons basketball. And one thing you know about Detroit Pistons basketball wins, and it wins championships. And that's where this team is headed. That's the trajectory of this team moving forward for the next few years. They are on that trajectory.
So you talked about all the things we've mentioned over the years, and I was interested to know what this time last year we were talking about. March 1st, 2024. Our podcast title was Isaiah Stewart returns from his suspension. Mike Muscala is bought out.
Sorry, Mike,
and the Pistons have a brutal loss.
Is that from Stewart punching Drew Eubanks?
Made March 1st.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's
Drew
probably
Eubanks,
correct.
Who, by the way, also a couple nights ago got sunned repeatedly out on the court. Just noting that.
Then the next week, the Pistons signed Taj Gibson. So just to show you how far things have come in a year, we had to talk about Taj Gibson playing for the Pistons. It's been a meteoric rise. And we talked about let's talk about JB first, because he is now plus 275 according to BetOnline to win Coach of the Year. Kenny Atkinson is still the favorite, and you can make an argument for both. I have a stake in either one. I think it's hard to not give it to JB because of where the Pistons were at last year. And I mean, they could be hosting a playoff series. They could be hosting a playoff series after, they are 6 wins away on this win streak from winning as many games consecutively as they did all of last season. So it's hard to discount that. Kenny's, the Cavs are like the 3rd best team in NBA history offensively or something I saw on social media. And it's hard to avoid that too. What do you guys think about JB winning Coach of the Year? You've said he's, should be the front runner. Does hosting a playoff series change that opinion at all?
Look, this is no disrespect to the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is no disrespect to Kenny Atkinson. But if you're not looking at JB Bickerstaff, if you're not looking at the Detroit Pistons, you're not looking at the turnaround that this team has made this season and saying this is the coach that has improved his team the most. He is the most valuable coach this year. I don't know if we're watching the same sport. Cleveland was a good team last year. They were also a team that was battling some injuries. Darius Garland was not the same player last year that he is this year, and that was because of health issues. They had other guys missing significant time last year. They're healthy this year. They're playing really good basketball. They're a really good team. In no way, shape, or form is any of this any sort of shot at them. We're talking about a Piston team that won 14 games last year. We're talking about a Piston team that won 31 games in the past 2 seasons combined. We're talking about a Piston team that lost 28 games in a row last year. They are a top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. They're a game back of the 4th seed in the conference. They've won 8 in a row. They've beaten some of the best teams in the NBA during this season. JB Bickerstaff has come in his first year and completely flipped the tides of this organization. And this is something that he did very similarly in Cleveland with the Cavaliers when he first got the job there after he took over as the interim coach. This is what JB Bickerstaff does, but this has been the most success that he's had in doing it in his career. The Pistons are a completely different franchise. They are a completely different team. And not that they didn't make some roster upgrades this offseason, because they certainly did. And the guys that they brought in certainly play key roles for them on this roster. Looking at the veterans and Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., 2 starters, and then a 6th Man of the Year candidate in Malik Beasley. But what this roster was last year is a lot of what it is this year too. The core guys are still there. The core guys are still playing vital roles for this team. Cade Cunningham has made a significant leap. It took a little bit of time, but Jalen Duren has seemingly taken a major, major leap in the right direction. Asar Thompson's back. He is now playing high-level basketball. Jaden Ivey was having a resurgent season before suffering his injury at the beginning of January. This is a team that has completely flipped, and a large part of that is due to JB Bickerstaff. I think if you're looking at teams improving, I think if you're looking at teams just becoming better as a team, better as an individual group of players, JB Bickerstaff fully deserves this award. This is something that I'll be expanding upon next week on palaceofpistons.com. So if you're not subscribed to our website, it's completely free. I certainly hope you go and do that now. The link's in our show notes, wherever you're watching or listening from. But it's something I'm going to talk about more. JB Bickerstaff certainly deserves to be in the running. He's really starting to get that national recognition for the job he's doing in Detroit. And I really think, if I had a vote, I'd have to lean towards giving it to JB Bickerstaff. And again, I'll wrap with this. Not a shot at anything Cleveland has done. They are a very, very good team, and Kenny Atkinson is doing a phenomenal job with them.
Yeah, no question. I think that is something that we have to make clear when we talk about JB for Coach of the Year, is that Kenny Atkinson, 9 out of 10 years, would 100% deserve this as like a slam dunk. He's done a great job in Cleveland. But as you pointed out, Aaron, they had injury issues last year. Mobley and Allen have played more minutes together this season than they did all of last year, by like 100 minutes. So that's been, a huge part of their resurgence. They were already a very good team. They became a really, really, really good team. But I don't think they're by any means the favorite for the title. Like, I would still have them 3rd, maybe even 4th, honestly. Like, I still think that Boston and Oklahoma City are stronger squads when it comes to the playoffs. So, like, what he's done is great. It's fantastic. But I don't necessarily think it changes that much for the Cavaliers' long-term outlook, or even their outlook on this season, to be completely honest with you. I don't really know if it changes that much for them that they're winning a lot more regular season games. What JB Bickerstaff has done is completely turn around the future of the Pistons franchise. He has changed everything about them in the way that they play defense. Since January 1st, this is the second best defense in the NBA, according to defensive rating. He has them all playing together. He has guys punching so far above their weight. He has developed players. He has figured out how to get guys to play together, and his rotations have been, for the most part, very solid for Detroit. It's all the things that we complained about Monty Williams not doing last year, basically, like player development, buy-in, defense. And we knew that JP Bickerstaff was going to bring these things to Detroit. We talked about it. But we also looked at the roster, and we said before the season started, hey, this is like a 30-win team. Like, if things go the way they should, this team wins 30 games. Maybe Cade becomes a star, they win 35. I still feel that way about the talent level of this roster. Like, if you just look at it in a vacuum and you compare it to some of the other teams around them, I still feel that way about this roster. So why are they punching so far above their weight? Why do all these players like Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren seem to be elevating their game, not just coming into the season, but as the season continues, as it progresses? Like, Cade has gotten better as the season's gone on. Jalen Duren he was a disaster at the beginning of this year. He is now one of their most important players. And Asar Thompson is playing genuinely like a guy who's going to win Defensive Player of the Year one day, maybe like multiple times. That's how good he's playing. So to me, I look at that and I just say, like, what do you want from your coach? What is the thing that you are asking from your coach? Well, it's to get guys to buy in, to develop, and to play together as a unit to elevate your overall win-loss record. JB Bickerstaff has done all of those things better than any other coach of the NBA this year. And I just don't think that you can argue otherwise. Like, again, Kenny Atkinson has done a great job, but there's like levels to this stuff. And I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it again. The Pistons are on pace to put up one of the 5 greatest single-season turnarounds in the history of this league. Every other team that did it added a Hall of Famer. They added Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Ron Holland, and Malik Beasley. There is levels to this stuff. And JB Bickerstaff is on the highest level of it. If he does not win Coach of the Year, it will be a historical snub, one that we will look back on years from now and say, wow, that was a huge mistake. That was a gigantic error. So, yeah, no, I think it's a no-brainer for me. I know people will continue to make arguments for other coaches, and I hear that, but no, I think it's absurd, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's as of right now, I mean, looking at plus 275, I would definitely take that. I would probably hit that sooner rather than later, because you never know what happens between now and the end of the season. Yeah, Kenny's had a great season, and the Cavs are largely the same roster. And it's very interesting that these two guys, one replaced the other. It's very interesting. The Cavs mostly have the same roster, other than Ty Jerome, who's turned into Chris Paul, and all they did was swap the coaches. Some growth happened, and now the Cavs are 48-10 or whatever. Very interesting. I would probably pick JB, just like you said, top 5 biggest turnaround year over year. It's hard to ignore that, but we'll see. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. But as of right now, you cannot look at what the Pistons are doing and overlooking it in any way. I mean, God, the other title in the podcast from last year was Monty Williams shortens the bench again. It's like, oh, I mean, just like a complete 180 in the utmost sense.
Another thing I'll add to the year-over-year improvement, and this is something that actually I read an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day, which, by the way,
wow,
I know. I'm just saying. By the way, it's so fascinating to me to see all these articles coming out saying the exact same thing that we've been saying for like the last month, but whatever. The other teams that improved like above what the Pistons are on pace to do this year, they were like better than the Pistons were to like last season. Those were all teams that were in that like 20 some odd wins mark. added a Hall of Famer, and then won up to like that 50-plus wins mark. There were more extenuating circumstances. No team has been as bad as Detroit is. And I think that's another thing you have to take into account is not just how good they've been this year, but how atrocious they were last year. And just how teams just don't – things move fast in the NBA. We've always said this, but like things don't move this fast.
Not like this.
They just like this is a miracle once in a lifetime turnaround job. So he has to win it.
Let's move on to Malik Beasley, who's the other guy who should be getting plenty of consideration for an award in his own right. Peyton Pritchard's the favorite to win the Sixth Man of the Year right now, according to BetOnline. Malik Beasley's plus 250, which again, kind of insane for a guy who's having a historically great shooting season on a team that, once again, could be hosting a playoff series. What are your guys' thoughts on Malik Beasley? I mean, this is a historic tear. Zach Lowe had some stat about it. It was super qualified. It was like the Thaddeus Young stat, where it's like players to have X amount of 3-point makes per 36 minutes, on
Mike,
every other Thursday or whatever.
I like how you can say the Thaddeus Young stat and
everyone knows.
Immediately know what you're talking about. It's the greatest, graphic of all time.
And Zach Lowe kind of did that with Malik Beasley, but he's in the company of Steph Curry, who's done it 3 times, like historically good shooting seasons. Any thoughts on the 6-man race? I mean, Malik was once again lights out last night. He's had most improved type player consideration as well. I mean, he's been the third most important component to the Pistons turning it around to me. Behind Cade and JB, it's Malik Beasley.
Malik has been spectacular this year. He's not just standing on the wing or standing in the corner and just he's not just shooting an insane percentage on these wide open catch and shoot threes. He is the type of player that is doing so much for Detroit than just the scoring output that he's giving them on a nightly basis. But I mean, let's look at the scoring first. Let's look at the shooting first, right? The amount of 3-point shots that he's making. And so many of these shots are on the move. They're highly contested. I mean, there was a shot last night that he hit against Boston. He came out, hit back-to-back threes to start the fourth quarter. And on one of them, he's got Neemias Queta all over him. I mean, jumping above him. His arm is above him as he's letting go of the shot. And Beasley's essentially falling back. Queta's falling into the crowd. And Beasley gets it to go. Beasley hits so many swing shots, so many momentum shots, so many shots where it's like, man, the Pistons are the other team's on a run. The Pistons really need something to slow them down just to get their feet back under them. Well, I think the 2 guys this year that have led the Pistons in those calm down shots are Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley. So Beasley, outside of the shooting, right, the confidence that he brings this team, the leadership that he brings this team, I think he has been a very competent defender for this team this year, which, I know he doesn't have a track record of that. He doesn't have a resume of being this great defender, but it's something that I said when they signed him that I think he's going to help them more defensively than many would anticipate. And he competes on that end. He's not going to be perfect on that side of the floor, but he's going to go hard. He's not just going to take possessions off. And it's fit with the mantra of this team. And I think he's been a key player in bringing that mantra up and bringing that compete level up and making sure that this team is confident in each other and ready to go on a nightly basis. Look, could say the same thing about JB Bickerstaff. If you wanted to bet on these guys to win their respective awards, you should have done so either a couple months ago or you should have done so at the beginning of the week, because both these guys' odds have absolutely tanked. Bickerstaff was plus 900 or something like that earlier this week. I want to say Malik Beasley was around plus 400, plus 500. They're not just now starting to get their recognition. So your buy low time on these guys was a while ago. I think Malik Beasley, you look at how he outplayed the heavy favorite to win the award, Peyton Pritchard. He completely outplayed him on Wednesday night, was vital for Detroit in that win. They certainly don't win that game without Malik Beasley. And if you're telling me that Malik Beasley's their 6th man of the year, I'm not going to disagree with you. It's kind of crazy that we're sitting here and we're looking at all the awards that are up for discussion. You got Cade Cunningham, who's kind of worked his way into the MVP discussion. Not that he's going to win it, not that he's going to come in second, and not that he's probably going to come in third, but he can end up being a top 5-6 guy for that award. You're talking about Coach of the Year, JB Bickerstaff, second in the standings for that. Malik Beasley's the second favorite to win Sixth Man of the Year, and then Cade Cunningham is the favorite to win Most Improved Player of the Year. So, you think about all those awards that the Detroit Pistons are up for. It's a pretty good way to sum up the growth that this team has had this season.
And Aaron, even more so to your point, look, if Asar Thompson was able to qualify based on like minutes played, I think you'd be seeing him getting votes for Defensive Player of the Year as well. I think there's an argument to be made that Pistons should be involved in discussions for 5 different awards this year, which is insane. And 2 of them, I think, like should be they're just the winners. Like I think Malik Beasley and JB Bickerstaff for me are the guys. And last night's performance was a perfect example of how I think Malik Beasley is just so valuable to this team. You said it, Aaron. He did outplay Peyton Pritchard. And Peyton Pritchard played pretty damn good. Like, Peyton Pritchard had a really good game. Malik Beasley was just better. And that's what he has done this whole season. He has hit big shot after big shot for this squad. He has, to your point, shifted momentum time and time again. He is one of, and this is an incredible part about this team too, he's one of like 5 guys you can say, oh, they're the heart and soul of this team. Like Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Cade Cunningham, Isaiah Stewart, hell, even Jalen Duren is really growing into that role where you're really seeing him take such pride in like gobbling up these rebounds and working hard on defense in a way that he wasn't before. And like him taking that opportunity to like reflect on how soft he was playing at the beginning of the year. Incredible growth from such a young kid. I think that's the amazing thing about like this team, and the amazing thing about Malik Beasley is how bought in he is. This dude loves Detroit, loves playing in Detroit. His mom's from Detroit. This was a thing even like when he was coming into the draft years ago. He said he wanted to be in Detroit, how much he loved the city of Detroit. And boy, do you see it. Like, he is so bought in. And when he hit that 3 that you're talking about, Aaron, I mean, him then just hitting the too small, like him hitting the shot over Sam Hauser and like pointing to him right afterwards. Incredible, man. He's got the whole arena like into it. You can feel the energy that he imparts into this squad and into this fan base. And like, I don't think that you can, like, how do I think about this team? At the beginning of the year, in the fourth quarter, you were getting Jared Goff chance when Cade Cunningham was going to the line. Now you're getting MVP chance. That's what a guy like Malik Beasley has brought to your team. That's what guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and all of them have bought into your team. They have brought buy-in, and like they just play the game the right way, in the way that like you love to watch them. I love watching Malik Beasley play, even if he doesn't have a great game, because I know he's going to hustle. He's going to work hard every single possession, and he's going to keep trying. He's never going to give up. And even if he goes 1 of 8 from 3, I know that one is going to be a big shot. So, yeah, for me, like, I love it, man. When I think of, like, what this team is bringing right now, I think of Asar Thompson last night hitting that crossover on Jason Tatum, and the camera panning over to Tim Hardaway Sr., who, like, 2 weeks ago, like, saw his son get like knocked out on an NBA court and like almost die right in front of him and had no facial expression. Tim Hardaway Sr. is like over there just going, oh, he's cracking up. He's laughing. That's what somebody like Malik Beasley brings to this squad. And I think last night just proved exactly why, to your point, Aaron and Mike, like, if you didn't get in on these 6 Man of the Year odds a month ago, that's on you, because we've been seeing it all season long.
Yeah. I didn't get in early enough, but I will be after this podcast episode. I've been trying to, tone down the sports betting a little bit after the Super Bowl calamity that it was. But there was a quote at the beginning of the season in training camp with Malik Beasley being the first guy to buy into JB and really sort of push that JB is a player's coach, and he was in Cleveland too. Everyone loved him. Kevin Love loved having JB there when he was named the interim. Said it was a great move for the Cavs. He's always been a player's coach, but Malik Beasley sort of being the mouthpiece for JB outside of himself being that mouthpiece, because you need vets to sort of establish that culture. You can't just go in and be a coach and establish that on your own. You're not Pop, you're not Spo. And even those guys have had to rely on vets to sort of spread the good word, the gospel. And Malik Beasley was the first one to pick that up and, really be the mouthpiece for JB. And I think that that's paid dividends. And you could see it on the court too, just the way he interacts with guys on the bench, the way he interacts with guys while he's on the floor. That's very evident. And that is one of the things that I think has gone a little bit unsaid. Yeah, the threes are, historic pace, but his leadership too, I think, is something that cannot be taken for granted either. It's not going to push him the 6th man of the year race, but it is something that's pushing the Pistons a lot.
No question, man. And I think that's been such a huge factor for this squad this year. It's just the vets stepping up in different leadership manners. Every single guy brings something different to this team. Like, you have Malik as your kind of crap talker, just your goofy dude. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., who's out there just grinding. You have Tobias Harris, who brings that calm, confident leadership. And let's be honest, you have Cade Cunningham and Isaiah Stewart, who have been here the longest. Stu brings that toughness, that grittiness. Cade brings that I'm the best player on the team, and the only thing I care about is making all of you stand out more than I'm making myself stand out. That selflessness, those things that you need. Everybody brings their own thing. And I just think and even JB with his advocacy for his players. He never stops talking to the refs. Everybody brings something different. It's been just awesome to see this year. And the buy-in for everybody, on their roles. Malik Beasley knows what he's out there to do every single game, and he does that, and he is proud of what he does. And I think that's another thing as well. There's nobody on the team trying to do too much. I remember we were all kind of scared, Tim Hardaway Jr., he had a reputation in Dallas of kind of going off script and ball hogging a little bit and, taking contested twos in the mid-range. Have you seen any of that from Tim Hardaway Jr. this year? Nope. None of that.
You've not.
He bought in.
Yeah.
And I just think that, it's just incredible, man. I can't say enough about. I just can't stop smiling.
Well,
I heard the Pistons won again. Pistons won again.
Yeah. And, they're going to have plenty of opportunity to continue that winning because, Aaron, they have a very favorable month of March with some games against some of the bottom feeders of the NBA. And, even like Portland, who's the best of this bunch that, you have here in our notes, there's no saying that Portland's going to be playing all their guys by the time they come around to play the Pistons. More teams are going to be resting guys, waiting for the draft, waiting for the lottery. That is. So the Pistons have a very favorable March.
They do. And if you're looking at the playoff race, which, man, every time I say it, it sounds crazy that, we're talking about these things in the same realm with the two words Detroit Pistons. But when you do start to look at that and you start to look at where Detroit might finish in the standings and you look at how close they are to Milwaukee, you look at how close they are to Indiana, and then you look at the schedule that they have in March. They start off March and they get Brooklyn, they get Utah, they get Portland. They'll play the Spurs at the end of March, obviously a much different team without Victor Wembanyama, and a team that Detroit beat by 20 a couple weeks ago or a week or so ago, whatever it was. And they also are going to get the Wizards twice and the Pelicans twice in March. This is, and I think we said this at the beginning of the season when we looked at the schedule, this is going to either be their easiest or second easiest month when it comes to strength of schedule. And if you're a Detroit team that is serious about this playoff push, they're going to continue to rattle off wins here. I think back to earlier in the season when Detroit would always seem to play down to the weaker competition and fight up against the stronger competition. Well, this is a good chance for them to prove that, they're not like that anymore, that they've grown beyond that, and that they're good enough to play against anybody and beat anybody, and they need to beat up against these weaker teams. You also start to think, hey, Jaden Ivey's out of a walking boot. We're getting an update on Jaden Ivey, or at least supposed to be getting an update on Jaden Ivey in the beginning of March. Is he going to be able to return potentially in March? Because this is the type of schedule that you'd want to bring him back in, a schedule against weaker competition, against teams that you should be able to beat, and in games that would, in theory, then be easier to integrate him back into the fold in. So I think March is a huge, huge opportunity for Detroit. For when you look at them in the standings, if you want them to go for home court advantage, I know there are some people that are fine with Detroit sitting at 6 because they want to face off against the Knicks. That's okay too. But if you're looking at winning as many games as they can, potentially earning home court advantage, March is going to be the best opportunity for Detroit in terms of climbing the standings in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I thought these last 2 games were huge, actually, for the Pistons, because you were coming right out of the All-Star break with a lot of momentum, and the Clippers and Celtics are very, very good teams. Clippers without Norman Powell, Celtics without Jaylen Brown coming off of a back-to-back, yes, but very, very good teams, very difficult teams to beat, and they beat both of them pretty convincingly. They deserved both of those wins, and for me, seeing that pretty much told me, okay, this is a team that is really capable of challenging for 45 wins. And like you said, Aaron, like you have probably 7, hopefully 8 easy wins right there in just those teams in March. And all you need to do is find 4 more wins out of the tough ones. And like, you can do that. You absolutely can do that with 20 some odd games remaining. I don't see why they can't. And at this point, yeah, my expectation is 45 wins. My expectation is they will have their best record since 2007, 2008. And yeah, they are going to go into the playoffs. I have said I want them to face the Knicks, but either way, I'm not going to be complaining about home court advantage if they do get it against the Bucks or the Pacers. So yeah, tremendous opportunity ahead of the Pistons here to not just like prove that this talk about them that has sprung up is legit and warranted, but that it might not even be going far enough, that they're even better than what the pundits are saying. And that's how I feel. I feel as though this is a top 10 team in the NBA right now. Perhaps better than that, to be honest.
Well, they could be getting Jaden Ivey back. As Aaron said, we should be getting an update like within a week. And you know who drafted Jaden Ivey? Troy Weaver. Yes, everyone get your angry faces on. Let's revisit Troy Weaver. So on ESPN First Take, which I did not see, Stephen A. Smith said that people need to give credit to Troy Weaver for putting together the roster that Detroit has, and that he deserves some credit for the team's success this year. Do we want to entertain this at all? As the Legion of Doom that we were, talking about Troy Weaver and getting blasted in comments about how we were anti-Troy Weaver and we shouldn't be. Let me just plant the flag that we were first and we were correct. Aaron, do you want to entertain this at all, that Troy Weaver deserves credit for putting together this roster?
Can I be a little bit selfish here and say that I was first before we were first on the pushback against Troy Weaver, because I mean, it was very apparent that this was not going in the right direction very shortly into his tenure as the Pistons general manager. I will say that I tweeted about this earlier today on Thursday before we're recording here now, and saying, I guess we're going to have to talk about this on the show. And I was absolutely floored by the amount of people who tweeted me and who tweeted at Palace of Pistons that they feel that Troy Weaver should be getting the recognition and success that this team is having because of the roster he helped put together. I was floored by the amount of people that felt that way. I was floored at the amount of support that came in for Troy Weaver. And there were other people that obviously are on the opposite side saying you don't even need to entertain this topic. This isn't worth talking about. Quite obviously it is. If there are still this many people that feel Troy Weaver deserves credit for drafting these guys and in his job as the team's general manager for 4 seasons. Look, let's start with the good for Troy. And what everyone says is he was a good drafter. Well, his first draft, he selected Killian Hayes with a top 7 pick. It was also a draft that he was very, very heavily reported to be interested in drafting the likes of James Wiseman and Patrick Williams. In that same draft, he traded so that he could then draft Sadiq Bey and traded a first-round pick with protections through 2028 so that he could draft Isaiah Stewart. And Isaiah Stewart has turned out to be a fine pick. But Troy Weaver drafted Isaiah Stewart to be a stretch 4. He didn't draft him to be this explosive backup center that has been the heartbeat of Detroit this season. He also attached a protected first-round pick that has ruined Detroit's flexibility in the trade market for years. During his tenure and now beyond it, it has limited Detroit's flexibility. So that's his first draft. His second draft, and that, we can also throw in Saban Lee for that draft. We'll see the common thread here is Troy Weaver was not able to make a second-round pick to save his life. Well, let's move on to the next year, where he takes the consensus number 1 pick, Cade Cunningham. I've also heard stories where Troy Weaver preferred Jalen Green and Evan Mobley, and it was others in the organization that pushed for Cade Cunningham. Okay, in that same draft, in the second round, he took Isaiah Livers and Luka Garza. Luka Garza, 2-way contract with the Wolves. Isaiah Livers, I think he's played maybe 15 NBA games. Okay, let's go to the next year. Jaden Ivey was the obvious pick that fell into his lap after the Kings drafted Keegan Murray. He also made the trade that allowed them to draft Jalen Duren. If we were talking about this topic, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we'd be saying that really wasn't a positive move considering the output that the Pistons are getting from Jalen Duren. It looks a little bit more favorable now. Okay. And then his last draft, he takes Asar Thompson and he moves up into the first round, late in the first round, to take Marcus Sasser, who is out of Detroit's rotation because he is not giving them enough at the backup point guard spot. So his best quality was as a drafter, as a prospect getter. And I think you could look at all of his top 5 picks and say that they were the obvious choices. His batting percentage outside of the top 5 is very, 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 very bad. Okay. Drafting is only one part of the job. And I guess people are forgetting that because this guy never made a home run move in free agency. He brought in Jeremy Grant, and that was pretty much the only significant move he made in
Joe Harris, my friend. Joe Harris.
Trade.
Well,
that was a trade. That was a trade.
That was a trade.
Oh,
so
you meant signings. Okay.
In free agency was Jeremy Grant.
Great too.
In the trade market, I'd love to go back and look at his history and see what Detroit got via trade. Was Bojan Bogdanovic the best player that he traded for during his tenure? He spent his final offseason as the team's GM trading. His 2 moves were trading for Monte Morris and for Joe Harris. This team's record with Troy Weaver as the general manager was 74 and 244. In what world are you giving him the credit now? I think this is a disgusting revisitation of a tenure that went so bad. A tenure where Troy Weaver wanted to hire his buddy to be the head coach of the franchise. A tenure that saw this team go on a historic 28-game losing streak. That a tenure that saw a team win a historically bad 14 games throughout an entire season. I can't believe the revisionist history that we're looking at now. I think it's appalling, and I keep going, but I know Jasper has thoughts here as well, and I want to give him his opportunity to speak.
No, Aaron, I mean, look, you could have gone on forever, as I think both of us could have, because it's funny. For the same reasons that you did want to talk about this, I didn't want to talk about this subject, because I do agree with you. I think it's despicable that Stephen A. Smith would go on national TV and give somebody as fraudulent, as actively detrimental to the Pistons franchise as a car bomb in a baby stroller, okay? That you would give that guy a single bit of credit for what this team is doing right now is absolutely shameful. And I'm saying that about Stephen A. Smith, one of the most shameless people on the planet Earth, okay? A guy who will absolutely do anything for a spot of attention. That you would give Troy Weaver an ounce of credit for drafting Cade Cunningham first overall, the most obvious number one pick, since what, Zion? It was the most obvious pick ever. We were talking about it for months. I said he was the number one pick in high school. Okay? I wanted Tyrese Halliburton over Killian Hayes. I wanted Jaden Ivey. And guess what? I also wanted Asar Thompson. Well, I guess that means that I'd be better at drafting in the lottery than Troy Weaver would have been. Make me GM. I wouldn't have traded for James Wiseman. I'll tell you that much. Okay? I would have taken the 5 first-round picks. I wouldn't have given away my first rounder for 5 years, okay, to get Isaiah Stewart, who I love, don't get me wrong, but he is a backup center. He's a backup center. That's what you did. And Stephen A. Smith, even more egregiously, to say that Troy Weaver cleaned up their cap. No swear words. I promise no swear words. That is the most asinine thing I could have possibly heard come out of his mouth. If Troy Weaver, what was he clearing up cap space for 4 years? What the hell was he doing?
Joe Harris.
For Joe Harris? Oh, no.
Clearly.
Take the can. You're in year 3 of Cade Cunningham being on your team, year 4 of your tenure, and you're clearing cap space. That either means one of two things. You're an idiot because you're wasting everybody's time. You're wasting development. You're wasting like a star's rookie contract in the most crucial years of his development to clear cap space for what? What did you think you were going to win? Either you knew you weren't going to win, in which case you're a moron because you're getting yourself fired because no one's going to keep you on after winning 70-40 games in 4 years, or you're just a complete moron because you actually thought you were going to win games with that roster, with Isaiah Livers as your backup power forward, with James Wiseman. Kevin Knox was in your rotation. What are we doing here?
And he was okay, comparatively.
My God. Aaron, the second round picks, of course, the trades, of course, the free agent signings, of course, overpaying for Kelly Olynyk, Marvin Bagley, offloading Mason Plumlee as a negative asset after he played the best basketball of his career for you. We literally could do like 5 hours on this. And this is why I want to talk about it, because it's bringing negativity into what is the opposite of the Troy Weaver era. An era that is not full of fraudulence. An era that is built on building a team and trying to win games and surrounding your best players with players that make them better. What a concept. What a concept.
You wanted to curse. I saw it.
No, one thing we ever never got. And this is the whole thing. He didn't have to do huge things. He just had to do some small things right. And he couldn't even do that.
Trajan Langdon didn't make big swings. You didn't need big swings. You needed smart team building, and you can be happy that he, drafted the players he drafted. But I'm going through on basketball real GM all the acquisitions and whatnot. It's definitely Boyan Bogdanovic is the best acquisition. I mean, if you want to say historically, include the entire career, then you could say Kemba Walker, but he didn't play with the Pistons. So it's
We didn't even
definitely
talk about
Bogdanovich.
we didn't even talk about like your Josh Jackson signings or Frank Jackson signings, all these guys who were on his draft board 5 years ago that he never gave up on because he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, even though he's the dumbest guy in the world. I hate Troy Weaver. I hate him. Get out, get away from my franchise.
The job of a general manager is to create a functional roster for an NBA coaching staff to then utilize to win NBA basketball games. The one skill that people say Troy Weaver had was a prospect selector. And if you looked at his batting percentage outside of the top 5, it's very bad. And his batting percentage within the top 5 is good because they were consensus picks. Outside of the draft, he was not financially smart. He kept cap space open but never utilized it. He was not good in trade negotiations, in free agency negotiations. At what point did this team have a functional roster during his tenure? They never did. Your job as a general manager is not only to be able to make big moves and bring in the big pieces when needed, but you also have to win on the margins. And what marginal wins do the Pistons have under Troy Weaver? A lot of the time early in his tenure, we heard about all these, buy low candidates that Troy Weaver was bringing in. Hamidou Diallo, Josh Jackson, Sfim Hailuk. The list goes on and on. I think Dennis Smith Jr. was in there as well during his tenure. You can go through all of those buy low candidates, and none of them have played significant NBA basketball since leaving the Detroit Pistons. I think Sfima Hailuk might be the only guy left in the league as one of those guys. So he never won on the margins. He never made the big-time splash acquisition. He hampered the team's flexibility in trade negotiations. I just can't believe that we're sitting here and saying that because this guy made the obvious selections that, quite frankly, if you are on NBA Twitter, all of the draft experts were telling Detroit, take Cade Cunningham 1, take Jaden Ivey 5, take Asar Thompson at 5. If you want to give him credit for that, even if you do, fine. But that is just one part of the job. There are several other parts that he clearly failed at. It's why this team, under his tenure, had the horrific, disgusting, deplorable record that it had. And I almost don't blame the people who want to give them credit, because a lot of them are on the younger side. They have not seen winning basketball in this city for 20 years. They don't know what it's like to watch a competent hometown team. They're watching good teams in the playoffs. They're not watching them in October, in December, in February. They're watching teams that for the past 2 decades have won 20 to 32 games every year. You have to have higher expectations. You have to be able to grade people on the scale that the rest of the league, where most of these franchises have won a hell of a lot more than the Pistons have in the last 2 decades, are grading their coaches, their players, their front office executives on. We're not doing this revisionist history and saying, well, Troy Weaver got him Cade Cunningham, and Troy Weaver got him Jaden Ivey, and Troy Weaver got him Asar Thompson. And quite frankly, as great as this season has been for the Pistons, the jury is still out on those guys. The jury is still out on Ivey. Can he coexist with Cade Cunningham? Are him and Cunningham capable of being a starting backcourt for a playoff team? The jury's out on Asar Thompson. He's a hell of a defender. Is his offensive game going to continue to grow and develop to the point where he is, a high-level wing in the NBA? You can make the same type of case for Jalen Duren. As great as this season has been for these guys in terms of their development, it's not like these guys are set in stone, home run, future all-stars in this league that, we're going to be watching for the next 10 years. They could be, but there's still a case that they might not be. That's the harsh reality of it. So, in short, to conclude, because I don't want to ever talk about this again, because we're actually watching a functional NBA team this year whose new front office leadership made rather small moves in the grand scale of things, and they're playing incredibly better. We're talking about an historic turnaround for this franchise. I never want to have to revisit this again. I mean, even at the trade deadline, you look at the guys that were dealt: Zach LaVine, Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis. I mean, the list goes on. The Pistons brought in Dennis Schroeder. Like, they brought in a guy that was a clear need for this roster, gave them ball handling, gave them point guard experience, gave them veteran experience. And would Troy Weaver have made that same move? Or would he have just been buying out guys?
No, he wouldn't have made that same move, Aaron, because the Pistons wouldn't have been in a position to buy at the trade deadline. That's the reality of the situation with him there. Like, that's where they were at. The last thing I want to just say on it as well is people giving him credit for being a good talent evaluator. I went back, I listened to our draft night review when they took Asar Thompson, and boy, I'm going to pat myself on the back because I nailed that analysis. I was kind of freaking out. I was like, damn, I was like batted 100 on that one. And I think the thing, though, is that not even that I have to give myself such a pat on the back. It's like, it was obvious. You don't have to be a great talent evaluator to know Kate Cunningham's going to be a hit. You didn't need to be a great talent evaluator to know that Asar Thompson was going to step in from day one and be like an all NBA defender. But on the other hand, you also don't need to be a great talent evaluator to know that Luka Garza was never going to be an NBA rotation player. That Davidas Servidis was never going to be an NBA rotation player. That Marcus Sasser is too small and not a good enough of a passer to be a backup point guard. And that's the real issue, is not just that, like, we would have been able to make the same picks that Troy Weaver made at the top of the lottery, that any really intelligent fan would have been able to make those picks. It's that any intelligent basketball fan would have been able to look at his other picks and tell you that they were doomed to fail from the start. That James Wiseman was doomed to fail from the start. That it was never going to work out with these guys. And I think like that's the other side of talent evaluation you have to look at as well. It's not just that he made obvious picks and he's getting credit for it. He made obviously terrible picks. And like, you need to also, like, if you're going to give him credit for one, you also have to damn him for the other. And that's the thing that doesn't happen. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about Troy Weaver ever again, to be completely honest with you.
So we're saying that he doesn't deserve credit.
No, I don't even think he deserves credit for talent.
This is what I'm hearing.
I don't even think he deserves credit for the only thing that you could possibly give him credit for, to be honest with you. So,
well, let's cleanse ourselves of this like 12-minute rant. Let's cleanse ourselves. Aaron, why don't you take us out with some end of show plugs that are soothing to the mind?
Look, I know we're going to have some people that are stumbling upon this podcast for the first time. You're just getting back into the Pistons, or you're just getting into the Pistons for the first time. This is where you want to be. Palace of Pistons, our podcast, wherever you're watching or listening from, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, leave us a like, leave us a comment. What do you think about Troy Weaver? I know we're going to have people on YouTube saying that we're crazy, that we're idiots for not giving Troy Weaver the success that he deserves. I want to hear your opinion, even if it's totally wrong and you're saying that Troy Weaver does deserve credit.
And I want to see your address so I can fight you.
We want to hear from you, but we also need your support, okay? I know there's going to be a lot of people that wherever you're watching or listening from, you're not following, you're not subscribed. That has to change. We need you following. We need you subscribing. It's going to continue to help us to grow. It's going to continue to help us be in a position to continue to bring you great content. So please do that. Please take the 10, 20, 30 seconds on wherever you're watching or listening from. Do that before you go today. We love you. We appreciate you. And we're a safe space. We're a support circle. If you're going to sit here in the comments section and tell us that Troy Weaver deserves credit for putting this Detroit Pistons roster together.
Couldn't have said it better. Aaron's like the dad that's dutifully driving and Jasper's in the back seat screaming his head off about something.
I'm sorry, Aaron. Those were really good plugs. You were doing great. It will be 2/3 of a support section. We'll say that. But you know what, Aaron? I support you, and I really do hope people support Palace of Pistons. Look, I make it a tad worked up sometimes, but truly, like, it does mean really a lot to us to see our audience grow, to see you guys like commenting, even if you're saying we're stupid and we're wrong. I don't care. Like, I'm happy to have you along for the ride. I hope you stay. And I hope that over time you will realize that some other people out there might blow smoke up your butt. This podcast never will. We will always give it to you straight. And whether that's, something you want to hear or it's the harsh reality of the situation, go back, check the receipts. We have always been consistent. We always will be consistent. We will always give you our best analysis. Yes, we are fans, but we love basketball too. And I think that's something, if that's what you're looking for from your analysis, you're in the right place.
Agreed. Yeah. And you can interact with us on a number of different sites, from TikTok to Twitter/X to Instagram to our Facebook page. And this isn't on here, but we have started dabbling in playback as well. So if you search Palace of Pistons on playback, you will find our area. I forget what it's called exactly, space. And you can follow along there. And anytime that we go live to stream a game and talk about it live, you will get notified. And for the playoffs, I think it's a must for probably every playoff game to do playback in some capacity. So we're starting to figure that out as well. So if you use playback, and I know it's gaining some steam as a different way to interact with your fans and with your community, definitely check us out on playback as well. And I think we're going to try to schedule those out a little bit more, as opposed to just saying, hey, you want to go talk about basketball for 3 hours. We're going to try to schedule it out a little bit more, but definitely search us on there as well, because we're going to be trying to ramp up as the season continues to grind on. Fellas, anything before we wrap up this long edition of the Palace Pistons podcast?
No, I'm going to go calm down after having to talk about Troy Weaver. I didn't know we were going to have to do that this year. I thought we're just forgetting that ever happened and moving on. So I need to go wind down. I got a feeling Jasper kind of needs to do the same thing. So I'm ready to go home at this point.
I think he's warmed up.
I was going to say, I think I'm going to go do some horse tranquilizers or something.
Yeah, he's going to go run 10 miles.
No, that's it for me. My God, I think I've done enough on this one. So I'm glad we got to talk about this team in such a positive manner. Just happy to be doing this with you guys every week. So
it's a long time coming, getting to talk about a good basketball team. It's a long time coming. And we hope that you'll stick with us as the season continues to move on and inevitably heads towards the playoffs, not just the play-in, the playoffs. And we are very excited to get to talk about all of that and more. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Palace Pistons podcast. I messed up this part of the outro because I'm very rusty. But we thank you all for joining in and listening. For my co-hosts, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition of the Palace Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network, and we will see you all next time.